Hey everyone, we're going to do the battle report for the battle in Hesse for the spring 1742 turn for the play-by-email campaign. But during the process of getting this all set up, I realized we missed the NPC battle in Tuscany that Spain moved into. The value is 2. They moved in with 8, so it's a 4-to-1 ratio, so they get a +3 to the die roll. So here I am recording myself, kind of explaining things. And then eventually rolling a die roll, and I get a 3 with the +3 on the die roll there. So that's a 6. The ultimate result ends being that Spain does control the territory of Tuscany, but they do not gain any SP. But at the same time, they don't also lose any SP. And so, with that, we're going to start talking about the battle setup. I sent out pictures of the battlefield to the different players and let them choose the battlefield. Here we have the Prussian setup, pretty linear setup, and here's the French setup. And kind of the overall battlefield here. The town there to the bottom right corner is a medium town, and then there's two videos. Two forests, and those were considered light woods. Even though the woods didn't have any maneuvering really going through them. I mean, they came into play as far as their obstacles and stuff like that. But so here we have a view looking along the lengthwise of the board. The left is the Prussians, to the right of the French. And if you look there towards the top, there's kind of the long woods, and then above the long woods is short woods. There's the Prussian 2nd Brigade there, and two lines of 2 abreast, and they've got the heavy guns up there. There's a siege gun, heavy howitzer, and a heavy gun. And here the Prussian players moving their hussar reserves. They're going to move them out to the flank, kind of get them around the corner at the end over there. And looking at the French side, the front line is a French brigade of 5 units, and then kind of angled back there's 2 medium guns, 2 heavy guns, and then there's another French brigade of infantry behind 12 inches of breastworks there. And one of the things we're trying to do is with the second line of troops there, that's where the French Guard infantry was, with all those bunch of high morale grade French troops. And so moving one of those French troops into the town to try to capture and hold the town there. The idea, assuming that the Prussian player is going to move into town, try to get somebody to get into town. Unfortunately, the way the setup rules were and the way the movement was, didn't have the ability to get into town and fully secure it before the Prussians were able to unmask their heavy artillery, which ends up becoming a problem in the very near future during the artillery phase. Not this turn, I think it's in turn 2 is actually when the artillery unleashes their fury. But part of the problem that I was having as the French player was didn't really have a lot of room to maneuver. Behind the town there, at the top of the French army, you can kind of see there's a block of cavalry there. And the idea was eventually I'm going to swing those out to try to kind of cover that north side of the town there. Here the Prussian players moving their 1st Brigade of infantry up along with all of their medium guns. So he's just kind of sorting it out. You know, what came apparent to me pretty quickly was the French had all of their larger caliber artillery kind of in the wrong position. And so as the Prussians were moving up with their medium guns, it became pretty apparent that ultimately the Prussians would have just been able to sit outside of musketry range and just pick away at the French line. So I trying to decide what I'm going to have to do as the French player. Here we are. You saw me flip the paper over and go on to turn 2. And the way the process works is you go through kind of any arrivals, rallies, stuff like that, and then charge declarations if you have any charge declarations. And then you go into movement, so that's when you start seeing troops get moved around. After movement, when you're in range to do some artillery and stuff like that, you have artillery phase, and then small musketry phase, and if there's any melee combat, then you do melee. So here we're back in the normal movement phase, and he got a card flip to move his 2nd Brigade first, so he's moving that up. He might have had a couple of card flip before an earlier brigade that he opted not to move. So he's moving his brigade up, and again, it was about this point when I realized I'm not really in a position to respond to him. He could just sit all day just outside of musketry range and just pick at me with his artillery, and that'd be a slow, painful bleed. And you notice there on the other side of those woods there, outside of camera shot, very faintly in the distance, he's swinging 2 of his artillery, or correction, 2 of his infantry units out wide in order to unmask his artillery. He's got a siege gun, a heavy gun, and a heavy howitzer, I believe that's said. So he's got the heavy howitzer kind of lined up behind the infantry there because it's able to lob shells over the line of infantry. And then here I am warming up that Grenadier infantry on the north, on the edge of that town there. With it also has a light battery. The idea is to defend the town, protect it against any movement, while I get the cavalry around to kind of protect that flank. So here I am moving. That's the 6th French Brigade. It's got 3 Dragoon units and a French Hussar unit in that composition there. So I'm getting them all situated, set up to figure out where I want to go to kind of defend that flank and see what I can do over there. And flipping for the cards, the Prussians are shifting cavalry to that flank as well. And here is, this is the artillery fire part, so we're measuring the distance from his siege gun, is I think what he's actually shooting. He's shooting a siege gun at that infantry unit that just formed up into line there. And it's well within effective range, and he was rolling pretty good with his artillery dice. And you'll eventually see the result of his artillery fire as I ultimately have that unit break and fall back into town. Let me do the morale check here very shortly. Normally in the Age of Reason rules you do figure removal, so you'll mark stands, and then after you get so many casualties as stands, you will remove the stands, and so the units whittled down. This time I decided to do roster tracking instead of figure removal. So you don't see any markers for casualties, just because we're got clipboards out to the side, and we're checking our casualties as we go along that way. Kind of helps keep the clutter off the board. And what we're doing now here is I'm marking the town, because we've figured with the heavy guns, when shooting into a town, you can cause hits on the town, and after so many hits, the town gets reduced to rubble, and it's no longer offers any type of cover. And I believe that roll I was making, yep, there I am. I've made my morale check for the unit taking fire from artillery, and I ended up getting a result which caused them to fall back broken. And so with that fallback broken, there'll be an orange marker placed on. You'll see red, yellow, and orange markers throughout the tabletop. Those are morale status markers. So here we are going to turn 3. And eventually I'm kind of in this situation where I'm thinking about, well, he's moving infantry up. My infantry in the town ran away, and he's getting pounded by artillery. I don't have anything back to respond. So I decided to take a gamble, and I got some cavalry with a distance and angle to charge his infantry. It's never a good idea to charge infantry headlong with cavalry, but sometimes I didn't really have any other options, to be honest. All he was going to do is just march his stuff up and then blast me away with muskets. So if I didn't advance and charge up into him, I might as well have just conceded the field, because he was just going to end up pushing up to me and shooting me anyways. And I didn't have any room to maneuver, so I couldn't go back, I couldn't go left, I couldn't go right, so really the only option I had to do was go forward. Now the process is you declare your charge, and then cavalry has to make a morale check to see if they do charge, which I have 2 units over there, they did on both of them. And then he would take his musketry fire against me on firing on the charge. And then depending on how that volley went, would be morale checks. Both sides then also make morale checks. Him for being charged, and me for receiving fire on a charge. And in this case, he got again some really nice rolls shooting against cavalry. I think he got closer range shooting, so every time he shot, he was hitting at least 2 or 3 casualties against my units. And again, it's with the Prussian. He gets the Prussian bonus, and then the first fire bonus, and then fire against cavalry, etc., etc. It was, Prussian infantry is pretty brutal. And one of the reasons why I did this battle is I wanted to test that. I hadn't had an opportunity to really play with the new rules in the 3rd edition, and so I wanted to test and see how effective was the Prussian musket fire. Because there's always the impetus when you're playing the campaign game is, well, I need to have, you figure I need to have so many, SP in a campaign game to attack and attack a territory or whatever. But the Prussians, with their Prussian bonus fire, that makes up for a lot. So actually you can have a disparity in your army forces on the Prussian side can be outnumbered, and they would still be able to hold their own. That was my theory. I wanted to see if that held true, and at the moment things seem to be going. It seems to be holding true. And as you saw there, my 1 cavalry unit failed a morale check to continue the charge. I believe it was a broken. It might have been a routed. I don't recall off the top of my head. The other one, the one that's still sitting there straight in front of the infantry unit in front of that white smoke, was just halt disorganized. So that's probably the worst option you can get, because you don't move forward and you don't fall back. You just stay there. So it's not a good option. So here we got going back to the normal movement phase, and you see him there adjusting kind of his lines for that brigade there in front of the woods. And again, he's shifting. These are a group of his brigade of dragoons. And shifting them over to that flank as well to give some cover. Then he's got some additional movement on that brigade on the north side of the woods there. And I'd been thinking, mulling the whole time over about whether or not, what I'm going to do about his approaching line. He's got the artillery to shoot me, but I've got nothing to be able to shoot him back. I could have shifted my artillery over. Because one of the things to keep in mind is the setup is blind, and so the French player and the Prussian players both set up their armies, but they set them up blind, not aware of what the other player is going to do. So the French player had this set up with the artillery kind of covering that salient there, and came to be that it just wasn't going to work. The idea, the theory of is pretty sound that. I'm on the defensive, make him come to me, and I've got defense and death and wear him down. But the reality is I didn't have the artillery to be able to make that effective. Where he had the artillery, he could shoot at me. So I really didn't have a choice. I had to advance towards him. As I'm looking back, I ended up moving that first brigade that's behind the works. I ended up moving them forward later, in a later turn. In hindsight, I probably should have moved them up. I should have just moved the entire first line forward, kept my grenadiers and guards in check at least another turn or two. But part of the problem is the my brigade there that I just moved forward is going to end up getting split, because I've got the Prussians on the north side of the woods that are currently massed to contend with too, and I didn't have enough over there, so I needed support to be able to effectively fight against them, so I can limit their maneuverability. So I ended up moving up the grenadiers and guards with it too. But in hindsight, I think I should have moved my troops down here with the artillery, so I could push the artillery forward, push those infantry forward. Probably still would have had to eventually move the grenadiers and such forward, but I could have maybe waited a turn or two to see how all that shook out. But as it was, yeah, I think it was I needed to move forward. I think maybe I could have also pushed my line forward a turn earlier, make him come to me, giving me a little bit more room to maneuver, especially with my cavalry back there. Give my cavalry a little bit more breathing room. But yeah, that's part of playing the game, is hindsight and all that stuff, is learning from your mistakes. So here we are figuring out getting to artillery fire again, and he's taking a couple more shots in the town. I think he's taking he might have been taking some shots at my infantry unit that was kind of broken in there or whatever. Ended up getting some hits to the town. Again, he was trying to raise the town to the ground into rebel to remove the cover bonus that the town provides. So those little smokestacks on the town there, that's town's on fire, burning down, and he ended up not actually collapsing the town. He ended up abandoning that and focusing on other stuff. So here he is. His artillery is opening up on me. He had his artillery in position while I moved forward to try to close the gap so I could shoot at him. And with his again artillery there in position, and then his Prussian fire bonus that he gets, it's a pretty murderous effect. And that was me rolling morale. I was making morale checks for the artillery fires against me. And then here I am, I'm checking measurement distances to see if I was in close range. Just a hair outside of close range. So I didn't get the close range bonus. But again, because my units moved, I didn't get a fire this turn, so I basically had to move up, take his shot, and then on the next turn is when I'm able to finally have a little fun and roll some dice. Let's see. I think we're rolling. Yeah. So that was the end. That was morale checks for small arms fire. Then here we are flipping over to turn 4, and doing some rally checks. The units that fell back disordered or broken or routed or whatever. After so many times, they can try to rally up. You also get into the charge plotting. Part of the charge plotting too is there's a rally back, so any cavalry that charges forward, you can plot a rally back, so that way they're not just hanging out in no man's land. So my idea here with that cavalry was to rally back, get them out, and I think, if I recall correctly, he takes the option to do opportunity fire on my retiring cavalry. Yes, he does. And if I recall correctly, I'd make a morale. I had to take a morale check for that because I had taken enough casualties, and the result I ended up getting was halt disorganized. So my cavalry got far enough to turn around and start running away, and they shot me, and they got stuck there. That's the nature of the dice sometimes. Just kind of works in that way. Then I think after that we start getting into normal movement again because I didn't have any other charges to make and he didn't have any charges to make. So from this point, really, there's not a lot of movement as far as the infantry goes, just because some fiddly stuff on my end. He does a little fiddly adjusting his lines. I do a little fiddly adjusting my lines as well to kind of match and suit. And then I also start moving some troops up to the north side of those trees there to try to engage his infantry on that north side. Again, because there was nothing over there, I didn't have an option to just sit and wait. Part of the thing is A, we're playing a game, so we want to play the game, have fun. B, we have to play the game within a certain time frame. I could have sat back and waited. All of the inevitables would have happened. It just would have happened, many turns down the road. So at some point, you just make some choices that kind of speed up the game a little bit in hindsight. So yeah, I did some adjustments. Started to get my cavalry reserve in there. There's 3 units of heavy cavalry, moving them into position slightly, kind of maneuver around a little bit. He's adjusting his dragoons, kind of provides support over to that wing, and then he's got 3 cuirassier units there. He's got this smaller guy brigade, and then he's got 2 of them in line just south of that. So, and then that was the other cavalry. The dragoon unit that had charged prior to the prior turn. That ended up routing off the board, so it's in the route status off board right now, which is why it got removed from the table because it ran back. There's an option during the rally back phase, even though if you're off board, you don't necessarily lose the troops. So you still try to make a rally attempt roll, and then, assuming they do rally up, you have the option to make an arrival roll, which happens at the beginning of every turn. It doesn't happen very often. More often than not, if your troops rout off the board, you're going to end up losing them. So here I am. I'm adjusting my troops to be able to get them into a shooting position. Those 2 there on that line. The first one moved far enough he couldn't shoot, but the second one he moved, but he still didn't move far enough to where he could still shoot. And there's the 5th Regiment on that line, again, focusing on the Prussians on the north side of those trees there, just on the other side. And then I'm supporting them with, that's the Guard Infantry I just moved. And then followed up by those 2 Grenadier units. That one Grenadier unit, there he goes. He did rally back. He came back. He moved back up. He rallied back in town. That's right. I do recall this. He rallied back in town, got back into line. He had spent all the time rallying and all that stuff, all the turns rallying. And I believe he gets shot with the siege gun again and ends up running away. That poor Grenadier unit just didn't have any new. It was his not that Grenadier unit's day. So, yeah. So here we're back into the artillery fire phase, and he was doing those heavy guns. Heavy and siege guns are brutal. They do a lot of damage, even though you're hitting on 12s instead of 6s like your small arms fire. But there's situations where you're throwing a handful of dice and you're going to get something when you get that many dice being rolled. So I think here he's still calculating his medium guns, and I've got 1 light gun there. It's kind of running him around treating it as a battalion gun. So I got him run up there. And I do end up hitting one of his artillery units. I end up making one of them, but I think I'm using that battalion gun to beat on one of the infantry units that's over there. And there's the morale roll for that grenadier unit in the town that just ran. I think that was an actual rout. I think he actually routed. So, here I'm checking my ranges for small arms fire and rolling dice and assigning casualties. I'm able to get a couple hits on them, 2 or 3 hits at a time, especially with the first fire. Usually on the French side it's an average of 2 hits, although the Prussian, especially when they're still fresh, they're at a minimum rolling 3 dice. Then if you're at close range, they're rolling 4 dice. So it makes a big difference. Casualty rate wise, the Prussians are causing 3 for every 2 that the French were doing. So that attrition rate is just it's not really sustainable, especially early, or especially considered early, given early mistakes. It's hard to recover sometimes. So I think here I am rolling morale checks, and most of them stay. There is a small that little guy right there, and I expected him not to last for very long, but he ended up getting a rout. Although I was able to rally him up. So, hooray for him. And then here we're just doing some paperwork, doing some accounting, is figuring out how many casualties we took. So we got the roster, and then so we're with the casualties that we keep track of throughout the turn. Then I've got a master casualty sheet, and so we, to keep track of total casualties as far as an army breakpoint goes. It seemed to work out pretty good. I'll have to ask Sean, the guy I was playing with, if he how he thought about it. He's used to playing with the casualty markers on the battlefield, but I mean it seemed to flow pretty well. So there you saw me flip it over to turn 5, going through the rally phase and all that kind of stuff, and then charge declarations. That one went pretty quick. We didn't have any charges this turn or declarations this turn, so straight on into normal movement. So we're doing brigade card flips, and it seemed like even no matter how much I shoveled up, it seemed like the Prussians always got the first moves. So he's getting adjusted. He had thought about maybe going into the woods, but he thought better or differently and retracted that move. But again, still, not a lot of moving on the line at this point. It's just little adjustments here or there at that point. Trying to figure out where. Yeah, so he's using his cavalry. He does make some adjustments with his cavalry, some pretty big moves with his cavalry. Although I end up moving those as well, which I think there might be some this turn. Yep, here we go. So I finally get to the point and say, okay, I'm going to move up the artillery, and although I'm still holding on to the infantry, and in hindsight, I don't know why. Like I said, when I, back in whatever turn that was, turn 3, I should have moved up that whole brigade instead of holding it back like that. Because if anything, I would have been able to push his cavalry back, and then also been able to give my guy some support. So, again, it's the learning process. So here he's making some adjustments with his infantry. He's, with my couple units that are moving up, he's starting to kind of turn and adjust. He's adjusting his artillery to turn towards my units that are approaching there. And so see, I can't remember exactly. He's thinking about what he was doing with them, and I couldn't remember what he was doing with them. What he decided to do. Just a quick short adjustment. Okay, that was pretty easy. I think it was just kind of give it a. He was really, having that heavy artillery on that flank, kept his cavalry at bay, because cavalry gets chewed up by artillery. Yeah, so there he's measuring. I think he takes a pop shot with one of his artillery guns. That guard unit was unmasked just enough that he was able to sneak a shot in with, I think it was his heavy gun, and then his siege gun was blasting away at my normal line infantry unit that's just in front of the guards. And then the eventual onslaught of Prussian musketry fire, because that'll be that Prussian's unit's first fire, and like I said, it's just murderous. So I believe we are doing small arms fire now, and so we did artillery fire, and then the morale checks for artillery fire. Everything went good there. So now here I am making rolls for all of the troops in musketry range, and then we take the morale checks for them. Denote their losses, mark down their losses and such. Again, this is the middle phase, late phase of the game, where the lines are now in contact, and that's basically what the game devolves into. It's just dice rolling and just grinding everybody down in the meat grinder. So here I am. I'm doing morale checks for my units, and they're getting whittled down. So that front unit there, I don't recall if that was a rout or a broken. But I believe that was a broken. He had, and that one was, again, I don't recall if it was a rout. Looks like a yellow marker, so fall back to disorganized. So I mean, that's what happens. Your troops just get whittled down over time, piece by piece, and then eventually, one side or the other starts to give away. And with that Prussian fire, it's a pretty hard hit. It whittles you down really fast, and so you find yourself falling away pretty quick. I'm trying to recall here what's going on. Okay, so we just got to the end. That was doing the intern paperwork. I think we also took a quick lunch break or whatever the case may be. Maybe we skip a turn. Feel like didn't pay attention to what the last turn was. So here we're showing turn 7. Or maybe I grabbed too much paper and I accidentally flipped too much, but I think what I'm rolling here is so I'm charging he's got a Hussar unit that moved up. So I'm charging his Hussar unit. I was getting to the point I needed to do something because again, he just kind of outnumbered me. I had 2 cavalry units there. I didn't really have infantry on that extreme flank, so I charged him. He passed his morale check. He countercharged me, and then the way his stuff was situated, he had his artillery, because he had turned his artillery to face towards my infantry that was coming up from the south there. So he turned his artillery, and it kind of presented this nice gap for me. So I took that, it was a hussar unit, and I decided to charge the artillery and shoot that gap. Now I knew I was going to take opportunity fire on the inbound run, which is what ended up happening. It ended up being a pretty hellacious fight. I took some pretty nasty casualties coming in like that. But what ended up happening was his artillery ended up failing the morale check, and so it unmasked his other artillery. And here we are trying to figure out, okay, at what point was he going to shoot at me? How much of flank bonus does he get? Blah, blah, blah. And we ended up, I can't remember exactly what we decided to do, but he made his roll. He took a lot of hits on me, and I had to make a morale check, and I had 1 die to roll, and I needed a 6 to continue on, and I nailed it. Got the 6. So what ended up happening was it counts as a breakthrough charge. I kept rolling forward. His next gun, it was whichever the next gun was, either the heavy or the siege. That gun ended up failing its morale check as well, and falling back, and which then in turn unmasked another infantry unit. So that infantry unit itself then made its morale check, and so we got into contact at that point. So we've got 2 melees that are going to be coming up. We got the melee with my charge against the hussars, and then the melee against the artillery. Or excuse me, blowing through the artillery and getting into the infantry. And the thing with the artillery is they failed their morale checks, but they did good enough on the morale checks that they were able to retire in good order. So they were basically able to limber up the guns and get in, and then run the guns out of there. So I wasn't able to capture the guns, unfortunately. That would have been spectacular. That would have come in handy a lot later. But he rolled just well enough that he was able to sneak the guns out, unfortunately. So then after that, we go back to normal movement phase, and he finally is able to, I think he ends up splitting his dragoon units. He has 1 unit seeing my hussar guy come up, and so he provided that with the support, and then he ran the other unit around the north side of that second group of woods. So here I am rolling the guards up, and then filling the hole with grenadiers that the other unit vacated, and then just following up with support behind the guard unit. There's always the debate of whether or not to get the guard unit engaged, because they're basically a glass cannon. They throw out a big punch, but especially the infantry, if they get engaged, just because of the way these engagements go, they're once they're engaged in the fight, they're going to be in the fight. So, and just the way the battlefield developed and where it was oriented, that's, the guard unit was on that side. They were just kind of the first in line there to go. So it would have taken way too much time to, put things into a different order. So unfortunately, they're up front. That's where they were. So here I am. I got the card. So that was the cavalry reserve. That's actually the guard cavalry there, and then with 2 cuirassier units following up behind them. Actually, one's armored cavalry. The second one's just a regular horse. So I started shifting those to the northern flank to kind of cover that gap, because it's wide open now. I'm taking desperate measures with the remaining cavalry on that flank. So I needed something over there. And then here I finally decided to start moving this brigade to the south. Realized probably 2 or 3 turns late that hey, I need to get these guys moving. And like I said, I should have had them moving earlier than that. But again, it's the learning process. You think about these things after the fact when you going through the video and putting it together and doing a voiceover for it. You know, you gives you a lot of time to rethink. So finally, I'm able to get the medium guns into action. And I think here is where he's deciding what to do with his cuirassiers. And yes, he saw me moving my infantry up, and so he's reacting to me moving my infantry. And so I think his intent was to basically run them around wide to try to basically fix my flank or threaten my flank to try to kind of slow me down or keep me from swinging my guys up to just basically kind of roll his flank around. So then with that, my 5th Brigade comes up, so I decide to push those guys forward. And I knew going into it that second unit that I moved is moving right in front of his grenadiers. I knew that it was going to take fire, but I needed to get him moving. I needed to get him up. So I decided just to take the risk and see what I can get out of it. And he ends up doing a pretty good wallop on him. And they fail a morale check, and they end up falling back. I'll have to see what the token is. I put a fallback disordered. So could have been worse, but it did disrupt things. But I do have at least one unit out there. So now I think we are on to the artillery phase. So here I am measuring my distance from my medium guns, and I'm going to start unloading on that grenadier unit. And I think he's also doing his stuff. So here I am rolling out my casualties and placing them out. And does his morale check, and he's got good security, secured flanks, secured rear, so he's got a lot of bonuses there. And then I think he didn't have a lot of artillery that turn, except for his medium guns, because I've ran off all of his other artillery already. So I think here's the morale check for the artillery phase, and for the most part, I think I am okay on everything. No, apparently I'm not okay. Something just happened there. I think he routed. That guy routed. That's right. I'm okay. Nope, I'm not okay. So now we're getting into the small arms fire phase, and I'm finally able to get my stuff going. I don't know. I never got any of his units to rout. I think he did have a couple, especially on that north side up there. He had a couple fallback broken, but he never had anybody rout. And again, my guard infantry had just moved up, so they don't have quite the opportunity yet to shoot. That's coming up here. I believe it's this next turn. So these, I think, getting ready to do morale checks for the small arms fire at this point. And to the best of my knowledge, I think I made through everything okay on the French side. I think on the Prussian side, everything went well as well. Here we're doing the melee. So that black die, I had attached the brigade commander to that unit that's attacking the hussars, and basically you roll up dice, and then you both roll a pool of dice, and then whoever causes the most casualties wins, and then you do a number of die rolls. So I ended up winning this fight, even though he outnumbered me 2-1. The problem was on the die result to determine how bad I beat him, I rolled a 1. And so our difference in casualty was 1, so I ended up causing a 2, which only pushed him back a couple inches. So that was a little frustrating. And then we also go through the melee in which I'm fighting against his infantry. And same thing. He puts up a fight against me, but I ended up getting the better of him. I do 3 hits on him versus his 2 against me, and I think I do a little bit better on this one. I think I do push him back broken, but I had run out of room, and so it was basically just occupy the space, essentially, or move your remaining movement. So here I am just moving the last little bit because that's pretty much the extent of my movement. I had already broken through 2 other units already, so I guess I can't complain too much. So so that was the end of that phase, and then we turn to the next turn, and if I'm thinking correctly, I believe that I just the previous turn I flipped over too many pages, and this turn I forgot to flip a page. So actually we're starting turn 7, which is the correct turn. You guys will probably be able to comment for sure and tell me if I haven't been paying attention to the turn order number there at the bottom. So, but anyways, here we're doing the rally phase. We're kind of flipping counters. I came up with a system to here we're doing command. So all the units that are out of command, putting down the out of command tokens, because that affects your ability to continue to advance. And then the rally portion, I came up with a system to where on the turn that they have rearward movement, you put the 2 side down, and in the rally phase you flip it over and it shows the 1 side, so that it tells you how many turns you need to sit, stuff like that. So that unit, it was a rally phase. He was red. He was supposed to try to make a rally from a route, and he failed, so he made another route move. That's what that was that you just saw. And so here I'm doing charge declaration. So this cavalry, you saw me point. I'm charging with my cuirassiers that I just moved out here. I'm going to charge the flank of this guy that's in column. And there was a debate. He was debating about maybe taking his cuirassiers to charge against me, but he was kind of masked a little bit by his grenadiers there. But also he ended up declining doing it because he figured he wouldn't be able to catch me. We were basically crossing the T, but I was ahead of him, so he would have basically just charged to my point, basically that point, which I would have already moved beyond by the time he would have gotten there. So he opted to not do that. So he ends up failing his morale check. He ends up going broken, and so I just end up occupying his space with that guy. So it all works out in that regard, because I'm kind of breaking up this flank over here. And like I said, it would have been nice to, I think, maybe have an extra turn or 2 on that if I had been a little bit more aggressive with the infantry and pushed them up a little bit sooner. But what are you going to do? What do you know? So I think here we're back into normal movement phase, and again, most everybody's either engaged or broken, or the stuff's falling apart, and so I just removed something. I think that was another rally check that I had forgotten earlier. I forgot to make earlier, so he routed off board again a second time. So again, back to normal movement phase, trying to do the best that we can. Not a lot of movement in the normal movement phase at this point, just because everything's kind of mishmashed around and all over the place. So he made a good move, try to reorient his units there that was in column to face the threat. So, and here he's just trying to figure out what to do with that guy. Making the best of it. And again, moving cavalry around there. He had that dragoon unit in there as well, so he's moving that out to give support to that hussar unit that was up that way. So I think at that point we get to artillery fire. Oh, we're still going normal movement. Yeah, there we go. So I got my guard infantry there is in position against his infantry, and then I'm just trying to get this grenadier around to kind of protect that guard unit's flank. Getting my guard cavalry around to help defend that side of the field from the vacuous hole that I have in that flank, because there's nothing over there anymore. And then just pushing up with the infantry on this side. And then I think I ended up moving up the artillery as the heavy artillery, heavy guns as well. So kind of get them up in position, get them ready. I think I got a token there because he obliqued full move, and so when you oblique over half, you become disorganized. So it was just a temporary disorganization. Kind of reorienting my cavalry there because they're again kind of ran out of room, and it's not really anywhere for them to go. So just kind of help give support again, because basically my artillery is kind of out in the open there, and everything had kind of gone away. So here, I believe I'm doing artillery. Yep, doing artillery fire. And able to get some hits against his grenadiers there on the end. I got 2 hits, and then I think I got 1 hit on, there's an infantry unit there. And then he's shooting back at my cavalry with his artillery. So he's got 3 medium guns in that line there closest to us, and then I think he had on the north side, I think on this turn he had his heavy gun or siege gun shooting, I can't remember. So then here we are doing just marking down our casualties from the artillery. I think figuring out morale checks for the artillery morale for those units that got damaged. So here he is telling me about casualties on me. And then we move into a small arms fire, and this is when I finally got to let the guard infantry rip. I rolled 6 dice on them. I only ended up getting 3 hits though, which was unfortunate. Oh, morale checks. We're doing morale checks right now. So yeah, that artillery failed the morale check. Yeah, that's the morale check that he failed as well. I think though that was just broken. That might have been a rout. I think that one was a rout. It was a rout, but with a short distance. You do a variable roll when you're out to see how far you actually move. And he ended up just getting a short roll. That unit either got. Oh, I think that unit routed too. It's just that his route distance was far enough. It took him off the table, so I pulled him off there. All right, now I think we're finally getting to small arms fire. That was my roll with the guard infantry. I ended up doing 3 hits against that guy. My grenadiers got their fire. Ended up getting like 3 hits with that guy. But I didn't have anything else because everything else whittled away. So. Yeah, we're definitely getting to the end game now. So think here we are figuring out morale checks. The guard infantry, they got a morale grade 4, so that they, until they're pretty much whittled down to the end, they're good. It's usually pretty good. Usually never have to worry about them, because even with the worst roll possible, they're not going to rout until they're getting to the point where they're almost completely wiped out. They might fall back and go broken, but it's really hard for them to rout. So yeah, that unit, I think that unit that he just moved there, that was his infantry unit that my guard infantry shot at, and he just fell back broken. And then I think, because we didn't have any melees this turn, I think we're at the point where we're doing the end of turn paperwork and getting to that point where we're counting up casualties, and we have to figure out if we need to do an army withdrawal check. And it ends up being that I've got enough, the French have enough casualties that they do need to make an army withdrawal check. And it ends up being that all said and done, that one cavalry unit did capture a flag, so I've got 4 dice I end up having to roll. And you need to get under a 12, and I ended up rolling like 13, so that ends up being the game. So there's the end results of the battle. The French do end up losing, they retreat to Westphalia. So that is that. Thanks for watching.